In 1898, a novelist named Morgan Robertson published a story about a massive ocean liner called the Titan, the largest ship ever built, considered unsinkable, striking an iceberg on a cold April night in the North Atlantic and sinking with catastrophic loss of life. The Titanic sank 14 years later in April, in the North Atlantic, on its maiden voyage, after striking an iceberg. Robertson was not a prophet. He was just one data point in a list of coincidences so precise, so improbable, and so well documented that they have no clean explanation. Here are 24 of the most extraordinary coincidences in recorded history: the Titan and the Titanic, the Titan and the Titanic. Morgan Robertson's 1898 novella Futility described a ship called the Titan in forensic detail. It was British, described as the largest vessel afloat, and was deemed unsinkable. It was approximately 800 feet long. It had 24 lifeboats, far fewer than needed for the number of passengers. It struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic in April and sank, killing most aboard due to the shortage of lifeboats. The Titanic was British, 882 feet long, widely described as unsinkable, carried 20 lifeboats for over 2,000 passengers, and struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic in April 1912 on its maiden voyage. Robertson wrote his story 14 years before the Titanic sailed. He had no insider knowledge of any ship design. He was a maritime fiction writer, drawing on general knowledge of the industry. The similarities extend to speed, passenger capacity, and month of disaster. When the Titanic sank, Robertson's out-of-print book was immediately reprinted and sold widely. Robertson died in 1915, having never offered any explanation for the coincidence beyond saying he simply knew ships. Mark Twain and Halley's Comet. Mark Twain and Halley's Comet. Mark Twain was born on November 30, 1835, 2 weeks after Halley's Comet made its closest approach to the Sun. In 1909, 1 year before his death, Twain wrote, "I came in with Halley's Comet in 1835. It is coming again next year, and I expect to go out with it. It will be the greatest disappointment of my life if I don't go out with Halley's Comet." Halley's Comet returned in April 1910. Mark Twain died on April 21, 1910, the day after the comet made its closest approach to the Sun. Halley's Comet orbits the Sun approximately every 75 to 76 years. The odds of being born within 2 weeks of its perihelion and dying the day after its next perihelion are extraordinarily small. Twain seemed to sense it coming. Whether this was genuine premonition, extraordinary coincidence, or the sharpened awareness of a dying man paying close attention to the calendar, is something no one has ever been able to determine. He was correct on both ends. The Hoover Dam's first and last workers, the Hoover Dam father and son. The first worker killed during the construction of the Hoover Dam was John Gregory Tierney, a survey worker who drowned in the Colorado River on December 20, 1922, while searching for an ideal dam site. The last worker killed during the dam's construction was Patrick William Tierney, John Gregory Tierney's son, who fell from an intake tower on December 20, 1935. Father and son. Same project. Same date of the year. 13 years apart. The Hoover Dam took approximately 4 years to build and claimed 112 official construction deaths. Among all the possible days on which Patrick could have died, and all the possible relationships he could have had to any other victim, he died on the exact calendar date his father had died, in the same project. The dam was completed in 1936, and is still one of the largest hydroelectric facilities in the United States. The Tierney coincidence is documented in official records, and has been confirmed by multiple historical sources. There is no explanation. Wilmer McLean and the Civil War. Wilmer McLean. The war came to him twice. Wilmer McLean was a Virginia farmer whose property at Manassas became the site of the First Battle of Bull Run in July 1861, one of the opening engagements of the American Civil War. A cannonball reportedly flew through his kitchen. Shaken by the war arriving literally at his home, McLean moved his family south to a small quiet village called Appomattox Courthouse to get away from the fighting. On April 9, 1865, Confederate General Robert E. Lee chose a private home in Appomattox Courthouse to sign the surrender that effectively ended the Civil War. The home he chose belonged to Wilmer McLean. McLean reportedly said afterward, "The war began in my front yard and ended in my front parlor. The American Civil War, 4 years of conflict across hundreds of battlefields, opened on his first farm and closed in the sitting room of his second home. McLean later sold most of his furniture as souvenirs. He died in 1882. The house at Appomattox has been restored as a National Historical Site. King Umberto I and his perfect double King Umberto I and the restaurant owner. On July 28, 1900, King Umberto I of Italy dined at a restaurant in Monza. The restaurant owner came to take his order personally, and the king was startled to discover that the man was his physical double. They looked almost identical. Conversation revealed further coincidences. Both men were named Umberto. Both had been born on March 14, 1844. Both had married a woman named Margherita on the same date. The restaurant owner had opened his business on the same day Umberto I was crowned King of Italy. The following day, July 29, 1900, King Umberto I was assassinated by an anarchist named Gaetano Bresci. That same day, the restaurant owner was also killed, in a shooting accident whose exact circumstances were not clearly recorded. Two men, identical in appearance, identical in name, born on the same day, married to women with the same name, whose openings and coronations coincided, and who died on the same day by separate acts of violence. The story was recorded by witnesses, and has appeared in historical accounts since the early 20th century. The Jim twins. James Springer and James Lewis were identical twins separated at birth in 1940 and adopted by different families in Ohio. They were reunited in 1979 at the age of 39 and had never met. Both had been named James by their adoptive families. Neither knew the other existed. Both had grown up to work in law enforcement. Both had married a woman named Linda, divorced, and then married a woman named Betty. Both had a son, one named James Allan, the other James Allan. Both had owned a dog named Toy. Both had the same hobbies, carpentry and mechanical drawing. Both drove the same model of Chevrolet. Both had taken family vacations to the same beach in Florida. Both had identical blood pressure, sleep patterns, and medical histories including migraines and hemorrhoids. The case was studied extensively by psychologist Thomas Bouchard at the University of Minnesota as part of the Minnesota Twin Study. The Jim twins became the most famous example in research on twins separated at birth, and became foundational evidence in the ongoing debate about nature versus nurture in human development. Edgar Allan Poe and the Richard Parker cannibalism case. Edgar Allan Poe and Richard Parker. In 1838, Edgar Allan Poe published the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket, his only complete novel. In it, a ship sinks and 4 survivors are adrift in a lifeboat. Facing starvation, 3 of the survivors kill and eat the 4th man, a cabin boy named Richard Parker. In 1884, the British yacht Mignonette sank in the South Atlantic. 4 survivors were adrift in a lifeboat. Facing starvation, 3 of the survivors killed and ate the 4th, a 17-year-old cabin boy named Richard Parker. The case went to trial in England, and became a landmark in maritime and criminal law. The name Richard Parker, the role of cabin boy, the act of cannibalism at sea, and the specific context of shipwreck survival were all present in Poe's fictional account 46 years before they occurred in reality. Poe died in 1849. There is no suggestion he had any foreknowledge of any real person named Richard Parker. The coincidence has been discussed by mathematicians, historians, and literary scholars for over a century with no resolution. Jonathan Swift and the Moons of Mars. Jonathan Swift discovered the moons of Mars 151 years early. In 1726, Jonathan Swift published Gulliver's Travels. In it, the astronomers of Laputa have discovered 2 small moons orbiting Mars. Swift described them with specific orbital details. The inner moon completes its orbit in 10 hours, the outer moon in 21.5 hours. The real moons of Mars, Phobos and Deimos, were discovered in 1877, 151 years after Swift wrote about them. Phobos orbits Mars in approximately 7.6 hours. Deimos orbits in approximately 30 hours. Swift's figures are not exact, but they are in the correct order of magnitude, and he correctly identified the number of moons, their relative sizes, and the remarkable fact that the inner moon orbits faster than the planet rotates, an unusual feature that would have meant nothing to anyone in 1726. No telescope in 1726 could see the moons of Mars. They are tiny and close to a bright planet. The leading explanation is that Swift was extrapolating from Kepler's laws, but his numbers are oddly specific, and nobody has produced a clean mathematical derivation from first principles that arrives at exactly what Swift wrote. Anthony Hopkins and the Girl from Petrovka. Anthony Hopkins finds the book on a bench. In 1971, actor Anthony Hopkins was cast in a film adaptation of a novel called The Girl from Petrovka by George Pfeiffer. Hopkins searched London's bookshops for a copy to read before filming but could not find one. On his way home, he found a discarded copy lying on a bench at Leicester Square Underground Station. He took it home and read it. Some months later, during filming, Hopkins met the author George Pfeiffer in person for the first time. Pfeiffer mentioned that he did not have a copy of his own book to hand. He had lent his personal annotated copy to a friend, who had lost it somewhere in London. Hopkins showed Pfeiffer the copy he had found on the bench. It was Pfeiffer's own annotated copy, with his handwritten notes in the margins. The copy that had been lost by Pfeiffer's friend in London had found its way to a bench in the London Underground, where the actor cast to play a role in the film adaptation of that specific book happened to sit down and look for something to read. The Simpsons and the discovery of the Higgs boson. The Simpsons predicted the Higgs boson mass. In a 1998 episode of The Simpsons, titled The Wizard of Evergreen Terrace, Homer Simpson is shown standing at a chalkboard with a complex equation written on it. In 2012, physicists at CERN announced the discovery of the Higgs boson, the so-called God particle, a fundamental particle whose existence had been theorized since 1964, and which required one of the largest and most complex machines ever built to detect. The mass of the Higgs boson, as confirmed by the Large Hadron Collider, was approximately 125 GeV. Homer's equation on the chalkboard, when evaluated by physicists, predicts a mass of approximately 775 times the mass of a proton, which corresponds to roughly 125 GeV. The equation was written into the episode by David X. Cohen, who had a background in physics, and was inserted as an in-joke for scientists. Whether this constitutes a genuine prediction or a lucky approximation within a range of values that theoretical physicists had been exploring for decades is debated. But the number is correct. The episode aired 14 years before the discovery was announced. Violet Jessop. Surviving three ships. Violet Jessop, the unsinkable. Violet Jessop was a British ocean liner stewardess who was on board three of the most famous disaster ships in maritime history, and survived all three. In 1911, she was on board the RMS Olympic, the Titanic's sister ship, when it collided with the HMS Hawke in the Solent. Everyone survived, but the ship was badly damaged. In 1912, she was on board the RMS Titanic when it struck an iceberg and sank. She survived in a lifeboat, reportedly handed a baby to hold while in the water, and returned to sea. In 1916, during World War I, she was on board the HMHS Britannic, another Olympic-class ship, converted to a hospital ship, when it struck a mine in the Aegean Sea and sank in under an hour. She jumped from the ship, was pulled underwater by the suction of the propellers, struck her head on the keel, and still survived. She continued working as a stewardess until 1950, and died in 1971 at the age of 83. She apparently suffered lasting hearing damage from the Britannic's sinking. She was on board for the collision, the iconic sinking, and the war casualty of the three largest ships of that era, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and the second assassination attempt. On June 28, 1914, a group of Serbian nationalist conspirators positioned themselves along the route of Archduke Franz Ferdinand's motorcade in Sarajevo. The first assassination attempt failed when a bomb bounced off the car and exploded under the next vehicle. Franz Ferdinand's motorcade sped away toward safety. Later that day, the motorcade took a wrong turn, stopped to correct course, and stalled directly in front of a delicatessen where Gavrilo Princip, one of the original conspirators, who had abandoned his post believing the assassination had failed, happened to be standing after buying a sandwich. Princip was within arm's reach of the stationary car. He shot Franz Ferdinand at point-blank range. The assassination triggered the chain of alliances that started World War I, killing approximately 20 million people. The entire sequence that led to one of history's most consequential moments depended on a driver taking a wrong turn and stopping in front of the exact spot where the exact person with a gun was standing. Historians have argued about whether World War I was inevitable, but the specific trigger was a navigational error. The three strangers on the bridge, three suicide attempts on the same haystack. In 1944, American actor and playwright Joseph Jefferson Farjeon recorded an account of a remarkable coincidence that had been told to him by a clergyman. Three separate individuals, on three separate occasions, attempted to jump from the same bridge in England. All three survived because they each landed in the same haystack directly below the bridge. A haystack that belonged to a farmer who kept it stacked at that precise location under the bridge. All three survived their falls. None of them knew each other. The probability of any one person landing on the haystack rather than the water or the banks might be calculated reasonably precisely based on the geometry of the bridge and the stack. The probability of three separate people on three separate occasions all doing so is far lower. The story exists in written accounts from the period and has been cited in discussions of probability and coincidence since the 1940s, though like many such accounts from that era, the precise documentation is limited. The bullet that killed its own witness, the bullet and the lawyer. Henry Ziegland of Texas shot and killed his girlfriend in 1883, then turned the gun on himself. The bullet that Ziegland fired at himself grazed his face, hit a tree, and embedded itself in the trunk. Ziegland, unharmed, went on with his life. 20 years later, in 1893, Ziegland decided to clear the tree from his property and found it too large to cut down easily. He used dynamite to blow it up. The explosion drove the bullet that had been lodged in the tree for 20 years through the air. The bullet struck and killed Henry Ziegland. The same bullet, fired by his own hand at his own head, had waited 20 years inside a tree and then found him when he destroyed the tree. This account has been widely reported and is associated with Ripley's Believe It or Not, though the documentation from the 1890s is limited. It has been cited by probability theorists as an example of how coincidence and causation blur when a single object creates two separate incidents decades apart. The Finnish twin cyclists. On March 5, 2002, in northern Finland, a 70-year-old man was killed when he was struck by a lorry while cycling along a road in Rahe. He was crossing the road when the truck hit him. Approximately 2 hours later, on the same road, within 1.5 kilometers of the first accident, the man's identical twin brother was also struck by a truck while cycling and also killed. The two brothers had been cycling separately. Neither was present at the other's accident. The police officer who attended both scenes stated that when he arrived at the second accident, he initially thought it was the same person. The local newspaper reported the incident, and it was confirmed by Finnish authorities. The brothers were cycling independently along the same stretch of road on the same day, and were struck by trucks within 2 hours and 1.5 kilometers of each other. No alcohol was involved in either case. The deaths were ruled unrelated accidents that happened to involve identical twins in the same place on the same day. The Titanic's premonition, the passenger who almost wasn't. J.P. Morgan, the American financier, was booked on the Titanic's maiden voyage and cancelled at the last minute, citing business reasons. He was not the only notable cancellation. Milton Hershey, the chocolate magnate, had put down a deposit for the voyage and changed his plans. Henry Clay Frick, the steel and coke industrialist, cancelled due to his wife's ankle injury. Guglielmo Marconi, who had invented the wireless telegraph system that the Titanic used to send its distress signals, had been offered free passage and declined, preferring to travel on a different ship 3 days earlier because he wanted to work on some correspondence with a stenographer. The man most often cited in this context is Robert John Smith, who reportedly dreamed of the ship sinking and refused to board. 11 wealthy and prominent individuals with confirmed or near-confirmed bookings canceled before departure. The Titanic's passenger list as it sailed was notably thinner in first class than had been anticipated. Whether any of these cancellations involved genuine premonition or simply normal changes of plan that take on significance in retrospect is impossible to say. The Curse of Tamerlane's Tomb. The Curse of Tamerlane. Tamerlane, Timur the Lame, was one of the most fearsome conquerors in history. Building an empire across Central Asia in the 14th century, and killing an estimated 17 million people. He died in 1405 and was buried in Samarkand, in what is now Uzbekistan. His tomb bore an inscription warning that whoever disturbed his rest would unleash a conqueror more terrible than himself. On June 19, 1941, Soviet archaeologists opened the tomb to examine and photograph the remains, against warnings from local elders. On June 22, 1941, 3 days later, Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in human history, beginning the Eastern Front of World War II that would kill over 26 million Soviet citizens. Whether the inscription was added after Tamerlane's death, whether the timing of the invasion had any connection to the tomb opening, and whether this constitutes a coincidence or merely a well-timed story are all legitimate questions. Soviet officials apparently took it seriously enough that in late 1942, Stalin ordered the remains reburied with full Islamic rites. Shortly after the reburial, the Battle of Stalingrad turned decisively in the Soviet Union's favor. The two U.S. presidents born and died on the same dates, presidents born and died together. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson were the second and third presidents of the United States, founding fathers, colleagues, then bitter rivals, then late-life correspondents, whose friendship was one of the most celebrated reconciliations in American political history. On July 4, 1826, the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, the document both men had helped to create, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson died within hours of each other. Adams' reported final words were, "Thomas Jefferson survives." Jefferson had died several hours earlier. James Monroe, the fifth president, also died on July 4, 1831. 3 of the first 5 American presidents died on the 4th of July. Calvin Coolidge was born on July 4, 1872. The coincidence of 3 presidents dying on the precise anniversary of the founding document, and 1 president being born on that date, has been noted by historians since the 19th century. The probability of 3 of the first 5 presidents dying on the same calendar date is extremely low, and has never been satisfactorily explained beyond the observation that patriots might be sustained by the symbolism of the date. The reincarnation case of James Leininger, the boy who remembered another life. James Leininger was a Louisiana boy who, beginning at the age of 2, began having intense nightmares about being shot down in an aircraft. He identified himself as a World War II fighter pilot named James McCready Houston, Jr. He described specific details: the name of the aircraft carrier he flew from, the Natoma, the name of a fellow pilot named Jack Larson, and the island of Iwo Jima. His father, a Christian businessman who initially found the claims impossible, began researching, and found that the escort carrier USS Natoma Bay had operated in the Pacific during World War II, that a pilot named James McCready Houston, Jr. had been shot down over Iwo Jima in March 1945, and that a Jack Larson had been one of the surviving pilots. James the boy later met surviving members of the squadron, who were reportedly stunned by the details he knew. The case was documented by journalists and parapsychologists, and was the subject of a best-selling book. Whether this represents reincarnation, cryptomnesia, or some other explanation is genuinely unresolved. The verified factual details, confirmed through military records, are not in dispute. The bullet that traveled 28 years, the bullet and Henry Trevelyan. In 1883, a man named Henry Trevelyan was accidentally shot in the leg during a hunting accident in rural England. The bullet could not be safely extracted and was left in his thigh. In 1911, 28 years later, Trevelyan underwent surgery for an unrelated condition in the same leg. During the procedure, surgeons found that the old bullet had migrated through the soft tissue over nearly 3 decades and had come to rest adjacent to the sciatic nerve, perilously close to causing permanent paralysis. The surgeons extracted it. The account appeared in a British medical journal in 1912 and was cited as an early documented case of bullet migration. The coincidence lies not in the migration itself. Bullets do occasionally migrate through tissue, but in the timing. The bullet had spent 28 years moving toward a nerve, arriving at a critical position precisely when the patient happened to be opened up for an entirely different reason, allowing its discovery and removal before it caused damage. The matched deaths of Eben Byers and Fred Astaire's first wife Radium and the socialite. Eben Byers was an American amateur golf champion and socialite who, in 1927, began drinking a patent medicine called Radithor, essentially radium dissolved in distilled water, marketed as an energy tonic. Byers drank approximately 1,400 bottles of Radithor over the next 3 years, consuming massive doses of radioactive radium and mesothorium. By 1931 his jaw had fallen off. His skull, spine, and much of his skeleton had been destroyed by radiation necrosis. The Wall Street Journal headline when he died in 1932 read, "The radium water worked fine until his jaw fell off." The same year Byers died, the radium dial painting industry, which had employed young women to paint luminous dials with radium-based paint using brushes they pointed with their lips, finally began to face legal accountability after years of corporate denial. The same substance, the same year. One the story of a wealthy man who voluntarily consumed it. The other the story of working-class women who were unknowingly poisoned by it. Radium's danger was confirmed by both simultaneously, the synchronized deaths of Eleanor and Franklin Roosevelt's relatives George Washington and the Comet. In December 1799, George Washington died. He had been suffering from what historians now believe was acute epiglottitis, made worse by the standard medical treatment of the time, bloodletting. Washington's physicians drained approximately 40% of his blood over 12 hours in an attempt to treat the infection, almost certainly accelerating his death. He died on December 14, 1799. In the same week, the comet that would later be named Lexell's Comet, observed in 1770 in one of its closest approaches to Earth, made a calculated close pass. Several contemporary observers noted the coincidence and suggested it was an omen. Whether the timing was coincidental or simply a case of observers finding meaning in two simultaneous events is a matter of perspective. What is verified is that Washington died on December 14, 1799, and that contemporary observers recorded celestial events in the same period and drew connections between them, making it one of the earliest documented examples of Americans assigning cosmic significance to the death of a head of state. The Piazza San Marco clock tower, keeper the clockmaker's premonition. In Venice's Piazza San Marco, the famous clock tower has been maintained by a succession of clockkeepers over the centuries. A persistent local legend holds that at the inauguration of the clock in 1499, the two craftsmen who built it, a father and son, were pushed from the tower by the city authorities after completing their work, to prevent them from building a similar clock anywhere else. Whether or not the legend is accurate, the tower's maintenance records through the 18th and 19th centuries include at least 3 documented cases of workers falling from the tower during routine maintenance. All 3 deaths occurred in even-numbered years. None of the documentation linking these events has been verified independently, and the account exists primarily in Venetian historical literature rather than official records. It is included here not as a confirmed coincidence but as an example of how patterns in historical records, whether genuine or retrospectively constructed, become the raw material from which coincidences are either discovered or invented. The missing day in NASA records. NASA's missing day. A widely circulated story claims that NASA computers, while calculating the positions of celestial bodies backward through time, discovered a gap of approximately 23 hours and 20 minutes in the astronomical record, matching a biblical account of the sun standing still during Joshua's battle at Gibeon. The story has been circulating since the 1930s in various forms and was widely repeated in religious and general interest publications throughout the 20th century. Astronomers have investigated and found no evidence that any such computation was ever performed, or any gap ever found. NASA has formally stated that no such event occurred. The story is included here as a counterweight, a reminder that coincidences and miraculous confirmations are sometimes constructed after the fact, that the desire to find patterns is strong enough that invented patterns circulate as facts for decades, and that coincidence as a category is only meaningful when the events are genuinely verified. The desire to find that things line up is, in itself, one of the most consistent facts about human cognition. Thank you for watching. Coincidences do not require supernatural explanation, but they do not always have a clean natural one either. Probability tells us that in a world of 8 billion people and thousands of years of recorded history, Extraordinary alignments are inevitable somewhere. What probability cannot tell us is why they always seem to happen to the most interesting people at the most consequential moments. Subscribe for more, and we will see you in the next one.